there, at least had his father getting there. He doesn't say we, he just said his father moved to Palmyra when he was 10 years old, which is the 1816. Then he said in about 4 years, the family moved to Manchester.
Okay, so if they arrived in Palmyra 1819, 4 years later, you're looking at 1822, 1823, which is what the assessment records indicate for their move to Manchester.
Right, exactly. And the thing that you have to remember is that Joseph Smith's story reads a straightforward way if you start at the right point. The thing that messes it all up is this thing about a beautiful, clear day in the spring of 1820. If you leave that out, the rest of the story fits fine with the historical facts, namely that after they get to town, they get on the farm in 1822, and then in the second year after arriving on the farm, he says there was a great excitement on the subject of religion, which puts you up to 1824-25, which is when the revival actually occurred. So all the evidence is completely consistent with each other, but it does havoc to Joseph Smith's first vision story. Mm-hmm. What it looks like is that Joseph decided to make up a story that's going to really wow everybody of seeing the Father and the Son, and he's going to drop that into an historical context where it doesn't fit. And as long as you don't have any factual historical data or records to compare with, everything works out fine except for that minor discrepancy about whether the revival was 22 or 1820. But once you begin to correlate it with actual historical documents, there's no way that you can fit an 1820 revival into the whole context of his story, given the points of correlation with known historical documents like the Palmyra road tax records and the Palmyra assessment records.
Okay, now let's, for everybody's benefit, let's construct a chronology then, without necessarily having to refer to each fact upon which we base it. But let's start with the family in Lebanon. From your research, what is the chronology that would take us up to the revival of 1824, 1825? I believe it started in September of 1824. Tell us where the Smiths are in a fairly concise way during that period of time.
Okay, we know they were in Lebanon, New Hampshire in 1813 and 1814. We know that they were warned out of town in Norwich, Vermont in 1816, which means that they arrived there probably shortly before March of 1816 when they were warned out. They spent 3 years there before the family moved to Palmyra. It was late in 1818 or early 1819 that they moved to Palmyra, and they stay in Palmyra until 1822, as both the road tax and the assessment records indicate. And in 22, they move on the farm for the first time and build their log cabin to move into. And then the following year, as Lucy's story points out, they start to build their frame house that Alvin was in the process of building when he died. And the second year after moving into their log house on the farm, then revival takes place, which puts you in 1824. So that correlates with all the known factual data of the contemporary data that there was a revival in 1824. There wasn't one in 1820, at least not within at least a 15 or 20 mile radius of Palmyra, too far to just walk down the road and drop in occasionally as he could, the way Joseph puts it. Yes. He says in another newspaper interview that it was in his neighborhood, and that's even more restrictive than in the part of the country where he lives. Mormons have said, well, he's in Illinois when he's writing his history, and he's talking about the part of country, and he just make it the whole of western New York. But Joseph specifically called it his neighborhood, and the neighborhood doesn't consist of territory 25 to 15 miles away. It consists of people within a mile or so of you, which is where he was, within about a mile of the meeting house in the village of Palmyra.
Yes, and he even says in his history that he attended there several meetings as often as occasion would permit, so it wasn't just once or twice, and you didn't make 30-mile round trips extremely often in those days,
right,
on a very frequent basis. Okay, now, I think everyone should understand, especially if you're just now tuning in, this spring of 1820 date given by Joseph Smith became a part of Mormon scripture in 1880, and it is not a part of scripture that is ignored by the LDS Church. You can, for example, watch the missionary films, the missionary film strips, read the testimony of Joseph Smith, which is, of course, one of the first things the LDS missionaries are going to talk to you about, and it is part and parcel of their entire message. In the spring of 1820, these two beings appeared to Joseph Smith in this vision in that beautiful clear day in the sacred grove there in upstate New York. So we're not talking here about something that is easily dispensable from the Mormon position.
That's correct. As early as Heber Grant's time, Mormons put out a recording of Heber Grant, little extract of the prophet, there's Mormon prophet speeches, and on that tape, Heber Grant is saying, if Joseph Smith, if he who did not have that first vision, then the whole thing's a fraud. Now, he made a Freudian slip. What he meant, he didn't mean to say if he did not have that first vision.
Right.
He said he who did not have that first vision. What he meant was if he didn't have the first vision, then the whole of Mormonism is a fraud. And that concept of it being pivotal, the foundation stone, has been echoed by Joseph Fielding Smith, by Bruce McConkie, and even a book that just recently came out this month, To Be Learned It Is Good If, compilation of essays. Milton Bachman in there, a BYU professor who's written a book on the first vision, he maintains that this is foundational, it's crucial. And if it falls, Mormonism has no foundation because they have rested on the truth or falsehood of this whole first vision story.
Now, let me ask you something else. According to Mormon history, the second vision, or the visitation of Moroni, Nephi, whoever you want to call him, whatever his name might be, occurs in September 21st, 1823.
That's right.
So if what you have said concerning the dating of the first vision is correct, then the second vision is now left hanging in midair someplace.
That's right. It's like a set of dominoes. Because Joseph hung them together, if you knock the first one down and date-wise, then the second one goes down as well, and it just throws the whole thing off all the way down the line, and you don't have him visiting the hills over a 4-year period because you can't do that. You only visit really at 2 times most, and
right.
Everything gets out of kilter.
Wesley, before we take our first phone call, let me ask you, has there been any response